Welcome to The Diplomat. I'm your host, Kang Sun-woo. World leaders have convened here on Jeju Island to build peace and prosperity. We are going to cover the Jeju Forum for the next 2 weeks, so before we meet today's guest, let's first visit that grand event. The 13th Jeju Forum for Peace and Prosperity will tackle the theme of Reengineer Peace for Asia, and it will energize the pathway toward peace and prosperity. The World Leader session is taking place now, so let's take a look.
Is that it's important.
At the World Leaders session, global opinion makers tackled the theme of re-engineering peace for Asia and other emerging challenges following the two breakthrough summits.
한국 정부는 어떠한 난관에도 굴복하거나 좌절하지 않고 지혜와 용기와 인내를 가지고 한반도 평화 정착과 민족 공동 번영의 길로 꾸준히 직진할 것입니다.
Thank you, Prime Minister Lee Na-yeon.
In attendance were former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, former Canadian Prime Minister Bryan Mulroney, and former Japanese Prime Minister Yasuo Fukuda. Taking part in the summit for a third time following those in 2009 and 2016, Ban stressed the importance of common wisdom and cooperation.
Pour all our strength and resources and wisdom to resolve this issue peacefully and harmoniously, and leave this legacy to our succeeding generations.
While Mulroney spoke about practical measures to verify the complete dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear weapons.
The message from this forum to the world should be one of confidence and encouragement, urging the key players to be steadfast in using this symbolic opening to conclude genuine, verifiable commitments that will ensure a denuclearized, more peaceful, and more prosperous Korea that will benefit the children and the grandchildren of everyone in this room and every room like this across Korea, south and north. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister Mulroney.
After decades of persistence, the forum is now considered a global platform for discussing and sharing a future vision for sustainable peace and prosperity in Asia. On this episode of The Diplomat, we invite former Canadian Prime Minister Bryan Mulroney to find out more about his vision for peace and prosperity in Asia, as well as the long-standing relationship between Korea and Canada.
When the Korean ambassador to Canada came to visit me to invite me to be.
Prime Minister Mulroney, thank you for the great keynote speech at the World Leader Session.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it, and it was very impressive to learn about the principle of trust but verify, and also the long-standing and strong engagement between Canada and Korea as well. How did you feel about your speech?
Well, Canada has had a long association with South Korea, and including immediately after the Second World War, the United Nations, as you know, put together a group of like-minded countries who came over here to assist South Korea in liberating themselves from the North and the Chinese in the war. And Canada, even though it was fairly small at the time, only maybe 13 million people, and we had just come through a major war where we had lost thousands and thousands of men.
Right.
We came back here into war again with 28,000 soldiers to help South Korea liberate itself from the threat from up north. So that, and you know, 516 Canadians died in that war, 300 of whom are buried in Busan here. So that creates special bonds between countries. And South Korea and Canada have a very special relationship, which is why I accepted the invitation to come here today to speak and to participate in what is a great initiative.
Just in general, how are you feeling about the session and the forum itself?
Well, I'm an optimist about both the future of South Korea and the negotiations that have begun. I've seen this happen before and with German reunification in West Germany. And when people get the smell of freedom, all kinds of things happen. You know, it's like you can't, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, you can't put it back in.
Right.
And once North Koreans smell the beauties of and see the beauties of democracy and prosperity that you have here in South Korea, my guess is that they're going to want the same thing for themselves and their children.
Right.
And that's when people start to say, hey, prosperity is a lot better than nuclear weapons. Let's build a future for our children.
So speaking of peace, the theme for this year's forum is Reengineering, Peace for Asia. What do you think the theme symbolizes for the region, especially at this critical time?
Well, the greatest threat to peace in the world today is North Korea,
right,
with their nuclear threat. And the removal of that would be an extraordinary development. It would help bring peace to the peninsula, would stabilize relationships with China, who have been helpful in this process, and in the entire region, from Japan to South Korea to the north to China. It would be an extremely beneficial thing to remove nuclear weapons from the Korean peninsula.
Right.
As I said earlier, I may be a bit of an optimist, a bit naive, but I am an optimist. I see the possibility of significant things happening from the Singapore developments. Now, I may be wrong, because we've been disappointed before by North Korea.
Right.
But for some reason, I sense that it's different this time, and that the new chairman wants peace. And if that's the case, we should be ready to deliver it.
Right, so do you think this is the time to give a chance to optimism?
Absolutely. Yeah. We've been pessimistic long enough. It doesn't cost anything more to be optimistic.
As you just mentioned, we have witnessed literally landmark changes on the Korean Peninsula, including the historic Inner Korean summits, North Korea, and the U.S. summits as well. What's your view on these sudden dynamic shifts on the Korean Peninsula?
Oh, I think, you know, of new people in there. Kim is a new leader, relatively speaking. He's had exposure to the West during his time in school in Switzerland.
Right.
He's a young married guy. The Olympics were very helpful, as it turned out.
Right.
The government of South Korea has played a key role in bringing the two parties together and arranging for instances where they could meet. And so I don't think South Korea and their contribution should be lost in the shuffle here. They made a major contribution to what we've seen so far. And obviously, on an ongoing basis, the government of South Korea is in a leadership position, and I hope they continue to play it.
So speaking of the Inner Korean summits and all of those dynamic changes, do you have any advice for President Moon Jae-in and also Chairman Kim Jong-un?
I said in the earlier hearings, the advice would be, Mr. President, don't listen to advice from former prime ministers. He's been doing well so far, and I just encourage him to follow his instincts and the rationale that's been articulated by his government, the objectives they seek, which are reasonable, and to continue to work with the Americans and the Chinese to help North Korea help itself. They need help getting from point A to point B. And they're not used to this.
Right.
This is a lot of exposure to the South overnight. And so I think that the government of Korea, South Korea, could be extremely helpful in that process.
Right. So going back to the theme of the forum again, what do you think needs to be done to re-engineer peace for Asia, especially what kind of challenges do we have right now?
Well, the principal challenge is the one we're talking about, up north. And I don't think that we should be too hasty in trying to get this done tomorrow. It's not going to be done tomorrow.
Yeah.
There are lots of obstacles there, and better take one's time and achieve the obstacles, overcome the obstacles one after another, slowly but surely, as confidence-building measures. And as both sides acquire greater confidence in one another, then mutual trust will emerge between the parties. And when that trust is there, then they can take bigger steps towards peace. But I would say it's going well, and not to prejudice the end result by taking chances at this early stage. Just keep doing, slowly but surely, what is happening. And I think that's good enough.
Yeah, right. So now the forum features some 70 different sessions covering a wide range of areas and issues. Besides the World Leader session that you just participated, which of them triggered your interest?
Well, my own interest is triggered by the whole concept of leadership in this issue. President Trump played a leadership role in jumping on this right away and saying, I'm going to do this, rather than say, well, I'm going to wait for 4 years and see what happens. Chairman Kim, the same thing. The president of South Korea, the same thing. So at the end of the day, with major governments, nothing happens unless there is leadership. And the person who articulates that leadership is the head of the government. And without leadership, you can have all the meetings you want, you can write all the books you want, you can travel the world as often as you'd like. Nothing is going to happen. You need national leaders who have the courage to say, and the vision to say, I'm going to do this because it's good for my people, it's good for my neighbors, it's good for the neighborhood, and it's good for the world. That takes courage, and I think that's been done.
So let's talk a little bit about your personal history. You served as Prime Minister of Canada for 9 years.
9 years,
yeah,
yes.
From 1984 to 93, right. And at that time, I learned that you introduced a number of major economic reforms in your country, such as NAFTA or goods and service tax as well. And even though those are evaluated as some of your major accomplishment now, however, you were met with some major opposition at that time. And what enabled you to hold fast to your vision despite the opposition?
Well, both of these matters that you mentioned, the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, which then we graduated into the North American Free Trade Agreement involving Mexico, have been and the goods and services tax, have been the salvation of the Canadian economy. The three of them were brutally opposed by all of my opponents. The Liberals, the NDP, everybody on the other side, a lot of the media, university professors, and so there was very strong opposition to everything. But, you know, President Clinton used to say that leadership is the capacity to look around the corner of history just a little bit. And as best we could back then, we looked around the corner of history, and what did we see? We saw a huge market for Canada, much better employment, much greater direct investment, job creation, prosperity. If we had the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement and then NAFTA and the Goods and Services Tax, which transformed for the first time in 65 years the system of taxation in Canada. You put them all together and the economy boomed. But to get there, we had a lot of opposition and we had to just keep going. We were attacked every day, morning, noon, and night for this. But I felt it was right as Prime Minister of Canada and leader of my party. So we stuck to it, we did it, and now the people who said that they were going to get rid of it if they got into office are now the biggest supporters.
So what effects do you think the agreement has had?
Well, look, you have to ask yourself, what is NAFTA? NAFTA is a grouping of 3 friendly nations in North America, Canada, the United States, and Mexico, representing 500 million people, which is 7% of the world's population, producing 28% of the world's wealth every year. That combination has created 55 million jobs since signature, most of them in the United States. And as a result of which, the American unemployment rate has fallen to 3.8%, the lowest in the industrialized world, and the lowest in America in almost 60 years. Now, I'll tell you this, if I had had a 3.8% unemployment rate when I was in office, I'd still be Prime Minister today. This is a tremendous achievement. So how can you argue that NAFTA was bad for you with such incredible results? What's great results? So I think there's a lot of politics going on there, but eventually people will sort it out, and NAFTA will be, you know, renegotiated, refined, maybe improved. But I don't think anybody would be foolish enough to throw it out.
Yeah, right. Let's switch our topic to a different one. Canada regards Korea as an important partner that allows the country to strengthen its cooperation with nations in Asia-Pacific region. How specifically does this partnership benefit Canada?
Well, we have a free trade agreement with South Korea, and our trade is growing all the time. We have huge immigration back and forth. The Korean community in Canada is huge and very successful. Moreover, we see the world the same way. We fought a big war together here. And as I said, there are 516 Canadians who died in that war. That's a lot of people for a small country at the time. And so we value our links with South Korea. And we understand that South Korea is a jewel in this area of the world. Its economy is fantastic. It's sophisticated, it's technologically advanced. And we can do partnerships with South Korea. South Korea and Canada together, a pretty good team. And so we have lots of friends around the world, and we're building on that.
So as you just mentioned, Korea and Canada have long enjoyed positive relations since establishing diplomatic ties 55 years ago. However, I believe there's always room for improvement. What advice would you give to the two countries to further strengthen their already strong ties?
There's always room to do better. And I think we've made tremendous progress, but I think we could focus more on new international trading opportunities. I think that Canada should be looking at free trade agreements with China, with India, with Indonesia, and in the process of that, involve South Korea in our international trading strategy more deeply, because we have so much in common. But I think there's lots of work to be done, and we have to strengthen our mutual commitment. This conference is a great illustration. I mean, I came all the way from Canada, which is a long way, to be with you, because I value the South Korean-Canada relationship. And when I was Prime Minister, I visited state visits here, had wonderful times, and we have great friends and valuable allies. I mean, your ambassador to Canada is very highly regarded. He's everywhere. He's everywhere, doing things and building a reputation for South Korea. So there are lots we can do together.
How would you compare Korea at that time, I mean, when you were Prime Minister versus after a couple decades ago, now Korea? How would you compare those two Koreas?
Well, I used to say that things have gone downhill since I left office. But no, the relationship has been dramatically enhanced since I was there, just because of the volume. You know, there are more people, there's more prosperity, there are more challenges, there's more international organizations to support, more occasions for cooperation, better communications, telephonically and television and all the things. Look, when I was Prime Minister, there was no internet. and, you know, and I'm not 110 years old. That shows what's happened. So the world has changed around us, and it's going to continue to change. And because of South Korea's vast experience and success in technology transfers, it's going to be a major player in the future with everything that's happening around us. And Canada wants to be part of that.
What is the image of Korea and Koreans for Canadians?
Oh, it's very hot. Korea is a country of the future as far as Canadians are concerned. And Americans, I must say. If you look at the television in North America, U.S. or Canada, Korea, and the Korean communities in both countries are highly valued and respected.
Right, right. What's the significance of hosting a diplomatic forum like this?
Oh, this is major, particularly given the timing of it, with what has happened in Singapore. This is, for world leaders, this is manna from heaven, because we get to understand those who are not here, like me. We get to understand better the nuances of what took place in Singapore, what the hopes are for the government of South Korea, what their intelligence is telling them about possibilities in North Korea. And to that, Canadians and Americans and others can bring the strength of their economies, their experience, their relationships around the world to bear in favor of South Korea and the U.S. cutting a very good deal with North Korea, which is in everybody's interest. With that, it's a win-win situation. We all win, and that's what everybody believes.
Finally, what do you hope for Korean and the world learn from this kind of big international forum?
Peace doesn't come readily or easily. It's been 70 years since Canada was here helping you resist the North and the Chinese. That's a long time. And so to expect that this change overnight is too much. But each foot along the way, each progress, and enough progress will provide us with what the forum has been talking about, peace and prosperity. Because as I said to the conference, if the young North Koreans get the whiff of prosperity and freedom, I tell you, dramatic things can happen very quickly. And so maybe I'm naive, but I don't exclude the possibility of the reunification of the peninsula in the fullness of time. And wonderful peace and prosperity here for everybody. And once that's achieved, I mean, it takes a big burden off the back of everybody in the world leaders, because all of a sudden what was a nuclear threat is now peaceful.
Right.
And so for the children and the grandchildren of both Koreas and the rest of us, this is a major achievement.
Mr. Mulroney, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your insight and wisdom with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you today.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you, and good luck to you.
The Jeju Forum-Special 2 will be aired next week with Nobel Peace Prize winner and former president of East Timor, Jose Ramos Horta.
She died.
15 over there.